Spin your passion into a business with Shopify and break sales records with the world's best converting checkout. Let's hear that one more time. The world's best converting checkout. Shopify's legendary checkout makes it easier for customers to shop on your website, across social media, and everywhere in between. Now that's music to your ears. Any way you spin it, you can be a smash hit with Shopify. Start your $1 a month trial today at shopify.com/records.
Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey everyone, I'm Susan Coffin and you're listening to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts audio broadcast. The topic today is food and nutrition, and it's a topic of deep interest to all of us with attention deficit issues or with children with attention or learning challenges. I guess what we'd all like to know is what foods are best for brain health, for attention, for focus, for cognition, and what shouldn't we be eating? And, finally, I think the question that many people have is there research that tells us anything about food, or are we dealing with just tons of fads? How do we sort of filter through all the information about what to eat and what not to eat in order to figure out what's best for us and our family? We're so pleased today to have as our guest Tana Amen. She is a nurse as well as a health and fitness expert with just amazing credentials. She's the author of 6 books, including a New York Times bestseller called The Omni Diet. So with that, let me turn it over to Tana Amen. Thank you again for being here.
Oh, thanks, Susan. Well, I'm so excited to be here, and this is one of my favorite audiences, obviously, because we deal so much with this. So for anybody who doesn't know, my husband is Dr. Tana Amen, and we have 6 clinics, and ADD is our specialty, so much fun for me. And as someone who grew up in a very ADD household, it's sort of fun because I actually didn't believe in ADD when I first met my husband. I thought it was nonsense. I thought it was an excuse for people to fail or not try. And then as I got to know him better, I realized, oh my gosh, this explains my whole life. So this was actually a really great revelation for me to understand. And what I love about this is I like to be able to give people simple solutions, and that's what I do. So my husband, we like to say, doctors tell you what to do, and nurses show you how to do it, and that's really my gift. So I like to start with a really fun story. These are 2 of my favorite guys that I start with. They're 2 gorillas, and their names are Beback and Makolo, and they live at the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. And it sounds a little odd, why am I starting with gorillas, but you'll understand shortly. So Beback and Makolo are 2 gorillas that live in a zoo, and they were dying of heart disease, even though they were barely middle-aged. And heart disease is the number one, oh, next slide, please. Heart disease is the number 1 cause of death in middle-aged gorillas, in warehoused gorillas. Heart disease is the number 1 cause of death, which is odd because wild gorillas don't die of chronic illness. They die of acute illnesses, or they're poached. But wild gorillas, they also demonstrate some other odd behaviors like pulling out their own hair and eating it and regurgitating their own food and re-eating it up to 4 times an hour. And so I got the opportunity to interview the zoologists over at the Cleveland Metro Park Zoo. And they were so interesting, and they told me that they were really concerned about Beback and Makolo because this is a huge problem in zoos worldwide. And so they started to suspect their diet. And then they explained to me why. Because gorillas worldwide commonly eat nutritional cookies, which is really odd because you'd never see, I picture a wild gorilla going out and to his local store and getting a nutritional cookie. So oddly enough, they decided to change their diet back to their wild diet. What a concept, right? They started giving them 11 pounds each of wild greens, nuts, seeds, berries, flax, and bamboo. They also started scattering it around their habitat, so the gorillas had to begin to move more. And it began to take the gorillas up to 75% of the day to forage for their new diet, which was, now get this, double the calories of the cookies. Their new diet was double the calories of the cookies. And within 1 year, the gorillas lost 65 pounds each, eating double the calories. And their odd behaviors of pulling out their hair and eating it and regurgitating their food disappeared. Beback reversed his heart disease, and Makolo radically slowed the progression of his heart disease. Now, when I think of this story, I immediately think of patients that we see at the Amen clinics who actually come in with similar behaviors. Now, I'm not saying they're gorillas, but I am saying they come in with these odd behaviors of pulling out their hair, of regurgitating their food, of feeling anxious, of not being able to focus, and of having things like heart disease and dementia. So were the gorillas crazy, or were they being poisoned? So I know that correlation is not causation, but it is certainly food for thought. And it makes me think of this sign that we saw in Monterey on 17 Mile Drive, where we planted our program in one of the oldest drug rehab programs in America. And I find this so interesting. Please don't feed the animals, because bread and snacks are unhealthy for squirrels, deer, and birds and can lead to malnutrition. I'm going to add to that. It's unhealthy for squirrels, deer, and birds, and gorillas, and people, and children, okay? But there's a little problem. So Bebek and Makolo, for about a week, they were a little grumpy. Like Cookie Monster, they were not happy for about a week. They missed their sugar. They missed their cookies. But they got over it, and they got healthy. And that is what we are trying to help people do, and that's what we accomplish with these simple solutions. We will help you get healthy. We know that food is medicine or it is poison. Yet even though we know this, people in churches, hospitals, drug rehab centers, schools are often fed, and let's not forget prisons, are often fed the worst diets. And of course, as a mother, the school situation drives me absolutely crazy. And I'm not sure whoever decided that ketchup should be considered a vegetable. First of all, ketchup is loaded with sugar, and second of all, tomatoes are not a vegetable. They're a fruit. If they're going to hurt our children, they should at least look smart doing it, don't you think? But here's the exciting part. In 2 studies from Holland, they found that by simply eliminating food dyes, sugar, gluten, soy, dairy, they were able to reduce the effects of ADD and the symptoms of ADD in more than 70% of kids. See, when we eat these kinds of foods, we wonder why kids, the incidence of ADD has gone up 20% since 2001, 20% in boys, and 11% in all children. But I find it exciting that by simply cleaning up their diet, by doing these simple things, we can eliminate symptoms in 70% of children. That's exciting. So I think of this as war, and I think of myself as a warrior and trying to help create other warriors. And I know a lot of people think that's a really intense word, but I use that word intentionally because it's empowering. And I haven't always felt empowered. As someone not only with ADD, but who grew up very sick and not realizing how much of a role diet played in that, I take it personally when I find out what the food industry puts in my food unknowingly and unwillingly. And when people eat highly processed, pesticide-sprayed, genetically modified, low-fiber, high-glycemic food, they're at risk to become very sick and have increased their risk of ADD. So here's another story that I love that really demonstrates this point very effectively. Recently, my husband and I planted our program into one of the largest drug rehab programs in America. And we found that what was really interesting about this program is most of these people were court-ordered to be in this program for up to a year. These were some pretty intense individuals, let's put it that way. But guess what? They really wanted to get well. And we found that the secret to this was to empower them and educate them. And the results were nothing short of astounding. So this is Laura Heiselman. She's a major in the Salvation Army. And she actually went through my program. She lost almost 60 pounds. But along with the 60 pounds, not only did her memory and her focus increase, her IBS went away, her rosacea, and her hot flashes. But she realized that not taking this information and planting it into the drug rehab center that she worked in, the chemical addiction center that she worked in, was nothing short of negligence, that they were inadvertently hurting the people that they were trying to serve. So Laura, she's a true warrior. She planted this program, and they were on a very tight budget, like not kidding. So I helped her plant the program and do it on a budget, and the results were just amazing. So there were so many stories, but a couple of my favorite stories. This is William. William said, as the days went by, my mind began to clear, plus my focus, memory, and even speaking abilities were better. He lost 55 pounds in 87 days, and he said he has a six-pack, but the kind that won't get him arrested. And this is actually my favorite story. Tomas. Tomas was, when he came in, depressed, hopeless. His words, no future. There was no hope for him. Gloomy, foggy, and overweight. He ended up losing 85 pounds by the time we were finished, and his mind was faster, clearer, and energized. But one of the really cool parts, he had not been able to finish his GED. In fact, he failed 3 times. After cleaning up his diet, he actually completed his GED, and he ended his testimonial to us like this. My life was a mess, and now it's a message. I have been tested. Now I have a testimony. I was a victim, and now I'm victorious. I went through trials, and now I am triumphant. I love that, because that is our goal, is to help you to become triumphant. And you can do that with 4 simple steps. Step 1 is take the time to educate, which I love that you guys are on this call, because taking the time to educate yourselves and your family is critical. We forget as healthcare professionals sometimes that people don't have our same knowledge. And so sometimes healthcare professionals use language that goes over, it just doesn't translate. And we want you to get educated in a way that really translates for you. So when I taught the people at the Salvation Army what this food was doing to them, what the junk food was doing to them, and why it was so critical for them to avoid things like sugar, because it literally is as addictive as cocaine or morphine. And according to this study, it's actually more addictive than cocaine or morphine, because sugar actually turns on more cells in an area of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, more cells than cocaine and morphine. When I was able to show them this and teach them this, they became advocates for their own health. So there are a number of experts that will tell you and show you why balancing blood sugar is critical to your success, focus, and making good decisions. And this becomes especially critical to people with ADD. So this is just many of the experts that I work with. So substance abusers more likely to relapse if they have they're recovering from drug addiction. Success rates are as high as 71% if nutrition is added. And it goes on and on to say why it's so important to get rid of simple carbohydrates and sugar. One of the big reasons, and this is where it gets really important for people with ADD to focus on food as part of their treatment, because different foods trigger different neurotransmitters. So when you eat carbohydrates, it increases something called serotonin, which is great for mood stability, sleep regulation, cravings. Okay, if your serotonin's low, you will crave simple carbohydrates. But you need to avoid things like the standard American diet, those simple carbohydrates and sugar, because complex carbs and the right carbs can help you, but the wrong carbs will set you up for failure. And here's why. Dopamine is actually triggered by the opposite, okay, not carbohydrates, but protein. And people with ADD, this is very important, because dopamine is responsible for motivation, energy, and here's the big one, focus, right? If it's low, you become unfocused, unmotivated, you make poor decisions, and what protein does is help to balance that. So you want to eat small amounts of protein, like 4 times a day, not large, but small amounts. So we want you to stop thinking of heavy carbohydrate meals as breakfast, okay? There's another substance called BDNF, just a small thing, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which really helps to stimulate new brain cells. It's involved in learning and memory and focus. When it declines, when BDNF gets low, it's associated with depression, OCD, memory loss, lack of focus, dementia. But guess what? It's diets high in sugar that cause this decline in BDNF, which means as you get older, ADD symptoms can get worse. So that's why we don't want you starting your day with donuts, waffles, pancakes, or bagels. Bagels, contrary to popular belief, are right on that list. They're not a good breakfast. It leads to brain fog, inflammation, unbalances hormones, and it causes cravings. So we want you to really think of simple food rules, and that's what we've done in our clinics. So when you're going through your food rules, make them simple for you. We created a plate just to show people, and you might not like salmon, that's okay. This is just an example. Think of 70% plant-based foods and 30% high-quality protein. Okay, and I'm going to go through and tell you what that means. But notice that this is not low fat. The plant-based foods and the salmon are both high in fat, but they're high in high quality fat. So think of high quality calories, because the quality of your calories matters so much more than the quantity. In fact, if you eat the right calories, high quality calories, just like Beback and Makolo, you get to eat a whole lot more, and that's exciting. So water is critical for people with ADD. It's critical for everybody, because 80% of your brain is water, and you need to constantly rehydrate it if you want it to function correctly and you want to be able to focus. And don't drink your calories. When I say don't drink your calories, it's fine if you're drinking things like green drinks, not fine if you're drinking sugar-laden drinks. Okay, so don't drink your calories. We want you to focus on clean protein. So when I say clean protein, I want you to think of things like free-range, grass-fed, hormone-free, antibiotic-free meats, poultry, and wild fish, and high-protein vegetables. And if you are vegan or vegetarian, think of organic tofu. That would be an idea of a clean protein. But eat it in small doses, again, because with ADD, protein is going to help you focus. You want it at least 4 times a day, but don't eat large amounts of protein. Think small amounts of protein. Think of it as your medicine to help you focus and balance your blood sugar. And then healthy fats. Fat is not the enemy. You want to get rid of fried fat and trans fats and most animal fats if it's from an unclean source. But you need fat. The solid weight of your brain is 60% fat. So be happy if someone calls you a fathead. So nuts, seeds, avocados, flax, things like that are great. Wild salmon. So in this study, a study done by our friend Cyrus Raji, he actually found that people who eat fish once a week, just once a week, actually have more gray matter in the front part of their brain, which is the frontal lobes, which is the part when you're talking about ADD, responsible for judgment, forethought, and impulse control. So when I say, I'm putting this in talking about fish, but I'm really thinking of fish oil here. So you want to be thinking fish oil and fatty fish if it's wild. In this study from the Mayo Clinic, they actually found that people who eat a fat-based diet have a 42% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease than if you eat a high-carbohydrate diet, which increases your risk by 4 times. That doesn't necessarily mean that carbohydrates are the enemy, okay? I want you to focus on lots of vegetables, especially green vegetables, things like kale, broccoli, spinach, chard, awesome. They're awesome. Brussels sprouts. A little bit of fruit, not too much fruit. And I think of smoothies as my go-to fast food because I make them the perfect combination of what I just talked about, protein, fat, and carbs. But I only use about a half cup of fruit. Don't make them a big sugar bomb. And I actually add fiber to it because when you're talking about carbohydrates, you want high fiber carbohydrates. Most people don't get nearly enough fiber in their diet. Eat from the rainbow. So this includes foods of many different colors, but again, not Skittles or M&Ms. It also doesn't include grape jelly or ketchup, like we talked about. But we want you to get the antioxidants that are going to really help to boost your brain. Things like berries and pomegranate seeds and bell peppers and different things like that. Cooking with brain-healthy spices, I think of these as so powerful that they should be kept in your medicine cabinet instead of your kitchen cabinet. Things like garlic and oregano actually help to boost blood flow to the brain. Saffron has antidepressant effects. Curcumin from curry, especially when it's combined with vitamin D, actually decreases plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. Rosemary, thyme, and sage enhance memory. Cinnamon boosts attention and balances blood flow and blood sugar. I want to point out here, one of the reasons I love herbs and spices, when it's really hard to get children to eat a lot of greens, there's actually a biological reason for that, so there's not a big reason to fight them on it. But you can increase their antioxidant level by using herbs and spices, things like cacao and cinnamon, whatever they'll actually eat. Cloves and vanilla, things like that are loaded with antioxidants. Finally, you want to lose potentially toxic foods. We have more success stories in our clinics by simply eliminating sugar and artificial sweeteners, almost all processed foods, gluten found in wheat, barley, and rye, especially for things like ADD, autism, schizophrenia. It's critical. Most grains, dairy, including milk, cheese, and yogurt, soy, and corn. I know people look at me when I say this and they're like, but what am I going to eat? Well, I've created over 300 recipes to help people with this. This is actually my gift. And it's really not as hard as people think. In my book, Healing ADD Through Food, there are a lot of simple solutions and simple tips, and we'll talk about some of those today. But think of the rules I just gave you and eliminate these foods. Try it for 3 weeks and see how you feel. So number 3 is to know your motivation. And when I'm working with people, it doesn't matter what tips I give you. If you don't really get in touch with your motivation and why this is important to you, this can't be a should. This has to become a must. Write down why this has to happen and why this is important for you. And know it clearly. This is Doreen. And Doreen is one of my heroes. So I practice martial arts. And I love Doreen because Doreen is an 8th degree black belt. She's a karate champion. But what people didn't know is she was secretly depressed. And she was unfocused, had brain fog. And she suffered with severe depression and bulimia for over 20 years. One day she attended the funeral of a 22-year-old girl who was the daughter of her best friend. She said she had never seen grief and pain and suffering like she did on this grieving mother's face. And it put her life into perspective. She went home. She got on her knees. She thanked God for every problem she's ever had. Then, in Doreen's words, she got off her rear, went to the gym and worked out, and then she ate a freaking salad. Now, Doreen's from Boston. I don't know how many of you listening are from Boston, so those of you who are will understand why I had to edit Doreen's testimonial quite a bit. But she's awesome because Doreen got in touch with her motivation, which is to empower female athletes. She's 57 years old, and she is competing in bodybuilding competitions naturally. She's awesome. She lost over 100 pounds, and her brain fog is gone. And finally, you need to model your message. You are not effective at convincing other people and leading people if you're not modeling your message. Be the change you want to see. You want your family to get on board and they're not working with you on this? That's okay. Be the change you want to see. This is one of our own doctors. He used to work in our clinic back east. Which doctor do you think people are more likely to follow? When he lost weight, got healthy, and got on board with the program, his patients were on fire and excited to follow him. And we certainly model this message by having a brain healthy clinic. And finally, I want to just leave you with these simple tips for kids. And I know it looks a little silly because I intentionally phrased it this way. Brainwash them early, play games at the table with their food, bribe them, let them make mistakes, make a huge mess in the kitchen. But I did that intentionally, and here's why. I find it incredibly frustrating that a clown with $1 billion bankroll can march into my living room at any time he wants to, if my television is on, and he can bribe my kid with a Happy Meal or whatever other toy is happening. And all of these other advertisers are doing this. And I decided, you know what? If they're going to do it, I'm going to do it. No one's going to brainwash or bribe my kid more than I am, right? So if they're going to do it, I'm going to do it first. So get to them early, teach them about healthy foods, why it's important, really show them. I mean, I get on the internet and I show my daughter. And we encourage playing games at the table. We teach her, we play brain games at the table about which foods, what foods are good for my brain, what foods are bad for my brain. We play all sorts of fun games at the table. I absolutely bribe her. I am not above bribery, and I'm not afraid to say that. So I take her to the grocery store, and I actually do scavenger hunts with her. And I pay her to read labels and find replacement foods for every bad food she can find. I actually give her $1. And I actually am I used to be the candy angel at Halloween. Now I'm the candy witch since she's prepubescent. But anyways, I buy her candy. I allow her to go have fun with her friends, and then I buy her candy from her. And I do let her, keep a few pieces, what she wants to keep, because letting them make mistakes is critical. They've got to be able to make their mistakes and fall down. And when she calls me and says, hey, Mom, can I have a green tea latte from Starbucks? I'm like, I don't know. Do you have enough money? Because I'm not going to pay to poison your body. If you're going to do that, you need to know the consequences. And it's just really important to make it fun, make it happy. We make huge messes in the kitchen when we're trying to create some new recipe together, and she's just an amazing cook already at 11 years old. So those are just a few of my simple tips for kids.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Tana. I think a bunch of the questions that are posted relate to this, which I know you can understand, which is, this sounds absolutely compelling, but how do you get started? Where do you start? And people are saying, if there's one thing that I should do first, which would it be? How do I start this?
So one of the things that I actually put into all of my books, Healing ADD Through Food has it as well, but you can actually download it from my website. If people want to email me, we'll send it to them for free. It's a quick start guide for that reason. And what I would tell people, I actually like the idea of jumping the canyon because I don't think you can cross a canyon in 2 small steps. So you start with an elimination diet. But to do that, you need to clean out your pantry. So number 1, get rid of it. Make one decision, not 30. Clean out your pantry, get rid of all the garbage, all the things that are on the list we just talked about, and then you want to also make a grocery list. So stick to your grocery list. Do not let the food industry and advertisers tempt you when you walk into a grocery store. Put the stuff on your list that you know is good for you. Stick to it. Make your grocery list of the things you're going to do. And I tell people to not only journal, but I don't want them journaling the day of after they've made a mistake. I want them journaling the night before. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So make a list of what you're going to eat the next day, what you're going to cook, and how you're going to do it. And then I set my kitchen up. So I want people to go buy a bunch of little containers and things like that, measure things one time so that they know what a tablespoon looks like. Mark it with a Sharpie on a container. They don't have to do it every time that way. Have enough containers ready. Boil a dozen eggs. If you're boiling an egg or a couple eggs, boil a dozen of them so they're ready for the week. Grill 6 chicken breasts so you have them for the week. When I'm making dinner, I always make leftovers so I have lunch the next day. And then know what to put in a lunchbox. So really it's about that planning process and knowing what's okay to eat, what you should avoid, and having those lists. And I tell people, you know what? For the first month, tape those lists up. Put them up so you can see them clearly.
That's a great idea, yeah. Well, speaking of that list of what you can eat, I think one thing that perplexes people a lot is what are they supposed to eat at breakfast? In people's view, dairy,
Yep. This is actually
bread,
not hard.
what actually do you eat at breakfast?
Okay, so I'm going to give you 4 things. I actually eat 2 of them, but I'm going to give you 4 things to make it really simple because my daughter likes a little more variety. So my go-to fast food is always a smoothie. It's just because that way I get my greens in the morning. I think you need to start your day with water and greens. So I get my protein powder, I get my greens, I get a half cup of berries, and then I also put some healthy fat in there. I think coconut oil and coconut butter and avocado in a smoothie is awesome. I put some extra fiber in there with flax seeds. That's my go-to fast food. But I also am not, if you're not sensitive to eggs, if you're not a person who's allergic to them or sensitive to them, I think eggs are great for breakfast. And I do it with like steamed broccoli or steamed spinach, something like that. You can do a quick omelet or just some scrambled eggs. And then I do, for my daughter, grainless bread. Okay, grainless, like muffins or grainless bread. She loves those. And that replaces that idea of bread in the morning. And the other option, and something that I came up with that is so fast and so easy, way faster than regular pancakes, I call them Tana pancakes. And there's 2 versions, one made with a little bit of banana and one made with pumpkin. And so they are absolutely delicious, super easy, and they're an egg base. Instead of a flour base, all it is egg, a little bit of banana, a tiny bit of almond butter, and some coconut oil. And literally, they're so fast and easy to make. I throw it in the blender, and then I just throw them in the pan.
Wow. Is there a recipe on
my website, Tana Amen.
Your website? Wow, it sounds probably great. Do you recommend a specific protein powder? There's people asking for still on the breakfast.
Well, of course, I'm partial because I make one the way I like it, but we actually have a protein powder. However, for people going out to a store and looking for a protein powder, what I want them to be aware of, just because it says healthy on the label, in fact, if it does say healthy on the label, you need to be very cautious. So what they want to look for is a protein powder that's higher in protein than carbohydrates. You want it to be a low carbohydrate protein for the most part because most protein powders are very high in carbs. So I like a protein. You're already getting your carbs from everything else you're putting in there. So you want to get a high protein, low carb powder. It should be sugar-free, no agave. I'm not an agave fan at all because agave is 80 to 90% fructose, which is toxic to your liver. So I like it sweetened with stevia. Okay, and those are the basic things that you should really be looking for.
Okay.
And I like plant-based, by the way, plant-based. I like plant-based proteins.
I mean, have you heard of designer whey? Not to recommend it, but is that...
I'm not a whey fan. I mean, it's, some people are fine with it, but we have so many people... Whey is it's a milk protein. And so the problem is we have so many people that are allergic or sensitive to milk proteins. If you know for a fact you're not one of those people, then I suppose it's fine. But I don't like the casein. Casein in the milk proteins actually is a very known excitotoxin in the brain. So we avoid whey.
All right. So when you say rule out dairy, a couple of people have asked, what about soy or sheep's milk yogurt
sheep and goat's milk have a slightly different property. So many people who are allergic to, they actually did a couple of studies with children who were severely allergic to dairy, to cow's milk, and they were actually fine with goat's milk or sheep's milk. And the reason why is the casein in the goat's milk and sheep's milk is actually very similar to human milk. So to mother's milk is very odd. And for some reason, it affects many people very differently than cow's milk. So I actually, in our house, will let my daughter have some goat cheese and things like that, and some definitely the yogurt. But you can also do coconut milk yogurt, but get the unsweetened.
Right. What about
great.
almond milk? I have like 5 questions here from people who want to know if almond milk's okay.
That is my number one choice. I definitely would avoid soy milk. I would definitely go with almond milk as long as it's unsweetened.
Right.
Because you can't get unsweetened soy milk, and if you did, you would gag on it. But also 80 to 90% of the soy in this country is genetically modified, and there's just too many issues with the almond milk, with the soy milk rather. The only soy that I really recommend is organic tofu. I'm not a big soy fan, other than some organic tofu for vegetarians.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Now, you said something that really sparked a flurry of questions. You mentioned grainless bread. People what is grainless bread and how do I get some? So
there's a couple things I want to say. TanaAmen.com, if they sign up for my newsletter, there are a gazillion free recipes on there, and it's on there. So my website, TanaAmen.com, T-A-N-A, Amen.com. And that recipe is on there, and so are the Tanana pancakes. There are a lot of grainless options on there.
So are you recommending some of the like the Udi's bread and breads that are made without flour? No.
Absolutely not, because they're too high in starch.
They're all full of cornstarch, right? I mean,
they're loaded with tapioca starch and cornstarch, which, by the way, those are super carbohydrates, which means they actually spike your blood sugar faster than regular bread. Now that said, once in a while, do I make French toast for my daughter using that bread? Yes. Okay, but I do not make it a staple in my house. Okay, so we will use that in place of bread if she's going to have a sleepover and they want French toast. Yes, I'll use that. But it's not something I recommend having every day.
Another breakfast suggestion that came in from Jennifer was mueslix with almond milk. What do you?
I don't like cereals unless she's talking about a homemade one. I actually have a recipe for a homemade one that is grain-free. I don't like grains. I don't like anything. I'm just not. We recommend people go grain-free for a couple weeks and then add certain grains that are gluten-free back in slowly, but in very small amounts. Okay. We recommend you start your morning, your breakfast, with a more protein and fat base. So we do have recipes, and I have recipes actually in Healing ADD with Food for a homemade type of granola or a homemade type of mueslix that is grain-free. So if she's referring to that, then yes, I'd recommend that.
Okay. Well, Chris posted a question which maybe was ironic, but let's find out. She asked, what about Pop-Tarts? and AS asked, well, how about pizza? So I don't know whether these folks are pulling our legs or what, but I'm guessing Pop-Tarts are not on brain focus.
Yeah, no, those I'm surprised they're still legal. I'm just going to go there. I'm surprised they're legal because they're not even food, but I don't even count them as they're a food-like substance. But anyways, I call them food-like
still on the breakfast question. What about oatmeal? Steel-pressed other oatmeal?
So oatmeal is one of those foods. We recommend you cut it out for about 2 to 3 weeks And then when you have it, so I will eat steel-cut oats once in a while, especially I practice martial arts. If I have a big, test coming up or I'm doing really intense sports, I will increase my carbohydrates a little and I'll have a little bit of them, but I don't have them often. And when I eat them, I tell people, think of them like a condiment. Don't make them your primary breakfast. I would definitely not have it every day. I would think of it like once a week type thing, once or twice a week max. And think of it like a half cup, and you should still put some protein. So I actually put protein in the oatmeal if I'm going to do that, protein powder, or I have some eggs on the side.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but think of like a half a cup of them. Don't make it a staple.
Okay. All right. Stephanie says, clearing out my pantry and starting over, planning the night before, new routines across the board sounds like a recipe for a failure for an ADHD adult. I would probably seize up and not eat anything. So what's your recommendation?
Then what I would recommend for that, okay, like I said, I'm a fan of jumping the canyon because it seems like it works better, but that may not be the case for everybody. So if that feels overwhelming to her, then the first thing I would do is have her do one thing at a time. So clean out her pantry. Okay, but then the next thing she's going to go is the next thing that's going to happen naturally is she's going to say, well, all right, now what? Okay, so she's got to have that. The list is actually, the grocery list can actually be downloaded from my website again. We have a preset grocery list. You just click what you need and you can print it. So that's actually done for you. Journal, done for you. I mean, those are things you want to get the things that you can get that are done for you in advance. And then you already go grocery shopping. So what I tell people, when I practice martial arts, when I first started, you can imagine, when you start learning something like martial arts, you feel really lame for the first couple months. You're like, I am never going to get this. I'm a failure. Like, I can't do this. This is crazy. And you think your body's never going to move that way, and you're ready to give up. And I think of this the same way. We have 3 stages in martial arts. It's called PMS, believe it or not. Primitive, mechanical, spontaneous. So those first couple months are really awkward, and they feel unnatural, and it feels hard. And then all of a sudden, you feel yourself slip into the next mode, which is like, oh, okay, I understand. It still feels a little mechanical. I still have to think about it, but it makes sense to me, and I can do it, and I don't feel like I'm going to fail. And then all of a sudden, without thinking, you slip into that next phase, which is spontaneous, and it just becomes second nature. Like, I don't think about what I'm going to pack when I go on a trip. I have it all set. It's pre-packed. So my question to most people is, how long did it take you to get yourself into a bind or to a mess or to the place you don't want to be? Is it worth taking 1 full day or 2 full days or even a week to set yourself up for success? Because you got to start thinking. It's a paradigm shift. This is not hard, but what it is a paradigm shift. It's sort of like, okay, if I were going to start a new language or a new sport or a new job or a new anything, would I take the time, 1 or 2 days to set everything up so that I could succeed? And don't think of it like, oh my gosh, this is like, it's my whole life. Just like 1 step at a time and move forward.
Okay. Just for a fun question here. For those of us who have Italian families, are there any pasta options? That's a great question.
Yes, actually. So most of the time, I actually use something called shirataki noodles for myself and my husband. Shirataki noodles, which are a form of a noodle they're pure fiber. And so the little bit of carbs in it don't even digest their fiber. They just go through you, which is great. And they help to balance blood sugar. And my favorite brand, I don't like the soy-based one. I like just the regular all-fiber noodle, which is my favorite brand is Miracle Noodle. They are a little odd because they come packed in a fluid, and you have to boil them to get rid of that sort of fluid flavor. And they do taste a little different. You have to have some sauce on them. You get used to them, and they end up being okay. They end up being fine. But for my daughter, or once in a while, again, it's that 90-10 rule. I have a 90-10 rule. So when I want to have some carbohydrates and I want to have some pasta, I don't eat a lot of it, but I use quinoa, and I use one that's not a corn base. Corn is on that list of things to get rid of. So I use a quinoa-based pasta that is corn-free.
Okay. Could you substitute spaghetti squash? Meg wants to know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what about pizza? People say pizza's served at school. Pizzas, what are alternatives to pizza?
So there's a couple of alternatives. One of the snacks I have listed in that's actually in Healing ADD Through Food is a pizza snack. Now, this is one of my tricky ways to get kids to eat veggies, and it is I core out. My daughter actually will eat a little bit of squash, so I'll core out squash or zucchini, and I'll fill it with an organic sauce, and I'll put her favorite topping on it. So I'll use uncured ham or something like that on the top, or, whatever, uncured pepperoni, and I'll put that on the top. You can use any topping you want to use. She even likes, pineapple and ham, whatever. And I'll put that on the top, and I put it in the toaster oven. The other option is if she's having a sleepover, that's one of the few times that I will use the gluten-free, and they make them pre-made. They're super easy to find. I'll go get a pre-made gluten-free crust, and then I just do the toppings myself.
Okay. So you just use a gluten-free pizza crust.
And I use a dairy-free cheese.
Right.
Or you can use a little bit of goat cheese.
Right. Goat cheese is great, yeah. How about, someone's asking about cold cuts. Are they okay as a protein? Moving on to lunch. I think people are looking for lunch. Pizza was in the lunch category, and for lunch suggestions, alternatives to grilled cheese, for example.
Yes. Okay. So what you want to look for in that case is, again, when I talked about ham, I go to the deli section and I ask for uncured ham that has 0 additives, no nitrates, no sugar. Most deli meat, most lunch meat has not only nitrates, but it's got sugar in it and a whole bunch of chemicals. That's what you want to avoid. If it's uncured ham or it's, turkey breast, I go get my turkey breast just sliced. And I know not everyone can do that. So I have another question, and that is compared to what? People will ask me, well, is this healthy? Compared to what? You want to get the healthiest thing you can. So if you have all the information and you go, okay, I can afford this, this is what I can do, get the healthiest thing you can. Try to get it without nitrates and sugar. Applegate makes one that's actually really good. So it's a high-quality one that has no nitrates and no sugar.
Okay, so turkey breast or ham
breast,
or whatever.
Chicken, ham, those types of things are fine.
Right, okay, right. I think they're a great way to eat. Popcorn, someone wants to know what you think about popcorn.
Okay, so let me ask a question. I'm going to answer that with a question. Why do you think that farmers feed cows corn and soy? To make the fat very quick. So it's to give them marbling on their backside. So popcorn is not a diet food. In fact, corn, which is not a vegetable, it's a grain, has the worst fatty acid profile of any grain, and 90% of it is genetically modified. So we find that when we get people off corn, they immediately start feeling better. It actually causes the same types of lesions in many people's guts that gluten does. So we're not a fan.
Okay.
So it's on that 90-10 list. 90-10.
Sugars. There's some curiosity about stevia, honey. How do you tell which sugars are okay and which ones are not, I guess,
So
basically?
stevia is, to date, I don't have any negative research on stevia. I have a lot of anecdotal, people sending me anecdotal stuff. Well, my friend Sally had this, but I don't have any research of anything negative on stevia. In fact, there's some evidence that it balances blood sugar and actually can help with hypertension, which means you have to be careful using how much you use if you are taking anti-diabetic medications and antihypertensives. So because it can drop blood sugar and blood pressure if you're taking medicine and you use too much of it. So stevia is still my favorite. Erythritol would be my next favorite. Erythritol, R-I-T-O-L, erythritol. It's a sugar alcohol. I'm not a fan of maltitol at all. Xylitol is sort of between maltitol and erythritol, but it tends to cause some bloating and problems, and people with IBS cannot use it, and with Crohn's disease. But erythritol is digested differently. It's digested in a different part of your intestines, and so it doesn't cause those same problems.
How about honey?
Very small amounts. Sugar is a sugar by any other name.
Right. All right. That makes sense. Question about eating out. How do you handle that?
I do an internet search because I travel a lot. So I do two things. I always take food with me, but I also do an internet search. It's so easy in this day and age. There's actually apps you can download to find healthy restaurants. But do an internet search. Find out where you're going to be, who has, wild fish or free range meat, who has organic vegetables. And even if I find myself stuck in, say, an airport, let's just say worst case scenario, I find myself stuck somewhere. Again, that question compared to what? I know that I can ask for a chicken breast and some steamed broccoli, worst case scenario. In most cases, they have something a little tastier than that. But you just have to learn to look at the menu. So I love sushi. It's my favorite food. I will get sushi, but I have them actually make it without the rice. I get rolls done, and then you wrap it in cucumber instead of rice. Or I eat sashimi. I'll do the hand rolls, but I won't have them put the rice in it. If you go to a Mexican restaurant, I get fajitas without rice and beans. I just get a lot of veggies with, the meat. Whatever type of restaurant you're going to, you can do that same thing. Think of a stir fry without rice. And so I will look at the menu and go, what is the healthiest thing on here? They will usually accommodate you because they want your business.
Right. Okay.
Now, I don't eat
just basically sticking to protein and vegetables, and basically, right.
And in most cases, they have something a bit tastier than that. If once you
Right.
get used to the concept, so I'll get I might get a side of berries, or I might get, and I'll ask for maybe a little marinara sauce on the side, or something like that.
No rice. Everyone's saying is all rice, brown rice, no rice at all.
It spikes blood sugar pretty fast. So I want people small amounts of beans. Yeah, so lentils are okay, black beans are okay. Certain types of beans can upset people's GI system and cause leaky gut, but too many beans can actually, it's primarily a carbohydrate. Yes, it has some protein in it, but it's primarily a carbohydrate. I'm trying to get people to focus a little more on vegetables and a little less on some of the starchy carbs.
Right.
So some beans are okay. Again, think of it like a condiment. But when you're talking about pasta, rice, potatoes, bread, okay, I want you to think about when you eat a bowl of rice, you're eating a bowl of sugar. And by the way, wheat bread is higher on the glycemic index than table sugar. So what that means is it spikes blood sugar faster than table sugar does.
Whew. Wow. Caffeine. A bunch of people saying, okay, I've done really well, but I have a really hard time giving up all caffeine.
I haven't given up all caffeine. So, I guess that is one of those things. We are not anti-coffee, but we do want people to really cut it back. Now, for some people, caffeine's a disaster. You have to know whether you're one of those people. The research on coffee is split down the middle. So what I mean by that is you have at least half of the research on coffee talks about how good it is for you. The other half of it talks about it like it's the devil. Okay, and there's a reason for that. It affects different people differently. Okay, there is something in coffee called kahewol, which is one of the most potent antioxidants on the planet. It has very powerful antioxidants in it. The problem with it is the caffeine can affect certain people differently. If you are a slow metabolizer, it's not good for you. If you're a fast metabolizer, it's not bad. You look at people in Italy, they'll have coffee at midnight and they go crash, right? So they are metabolizing it fast, it's not affecting them. We don't want you to drink coffee if it's affecting your sleep, and we don't want you to drink it if it's affecting your blood pressure or your heart rate. So you can do the poor man's test. You can actually have a genetic test done, but that's hard. You can do a poor man's test, which means that you take your blood pressure and your heart rate, and then you drink a cup of coffee and you take it again. And if it has a dramatic increase, then it means it's probably not that great, and if you're not going to cut it out, you should at least cut it way back. And if you drink it at noon and you can't go to sleep at night, then that means you're a very slow metabolizer, and it's probably having a big effect on your heart. So those are the things you want to watch for. What I do, a trick that I do, because I like the comfort food aspect, okay, so I make, my husband and I both have it in the morning, but I make a pot of half-calf coffee, so it's still the psychological effect. So I make a pot of half-calf, and then I make an almond milk latte, which means I'm cutting that in half again with warm almond milk and some cinnamon on top. Okay, and then I actually put coconut oil in it and a little bit of ghee, because that's really good for your gut, and it increases your metabolism and helps you burn fat. So now I've got quarter calf. I have a big giant quarter calf latte in the morning with cinnamon, and it makes me really full because it's got coconut oil in it. And it's delicious, and it's a huge comfort food.
Wow, sounds great. Oh, here's a great comment from Betty. She says, I was actually raised on unsweetened soy milk. Now, I wouldn't say that you would gag, but it is an acquired taste. That's pretty funny.
Well, good for her, but
Yeah.
I would make sure it's organic.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's see. I guess some of the last questions here relate to snacks for kids.
Yep. Snacks for kids, that's always a big one. That comes up every time. So, in fact, I end up doing whole lectures on kids.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's several things I use, and they're all in the Healing ADD book, but it's things like I have something called a Cocoa Banana Delight that I do for my daughter, and that's coconut wraps. So coconut wraps are one of my favorite bread alternatives for snacks. The Paleo brand makes one. There's another. There's a couple.
It's a coconut wrap. What is that?
It's a coconut wrap. It's literally coconut that is made into a flat wrap. It looks like a little tortilla.
Huh.
And so they're awesome for making. You can actually. They make Pure Wraps makes one that's curry flavored, and I love to wrap that up with some wild salmon or some turkey and avocado. Awesome. But for my daughter, I'll use the plain flavor, and I put almond butter, and I'll slice up a half a banana. And that's her lunch.
Okay.
She loves that. Or I'll do something like an apple sandwich where I slice apples into rings and put some almond butter on that. Or I freeze grapes so that she doesn't eat a whole bowl of them. They're like little popsicles. Mm-hmm. And then if you make kale chips the right way, I actually find my daughter likes them because I'll make chocolate flavored or cinnamon. And I do sweet potato chips. They're so easy to make. You just broil them and put cinnamon on them. Oh my gosh, they're so easy. You just slice them.
Wow. Interesting.
Homemade protein bars. There's so many things. The pizza snacks we talked about.
Right. Okay, last grown-up question. What about wine and alcohol? Everyone says,
Two questions.
Are you giving up all wine?
Well, actually, the three questions that always come up: bread, coffee, and wine. Every time.
Right.
So wine, yes. Again, it's one of those things where we want to make sure you understand that alcohol is not a health food, okay? However, a little bit of wine has actually not been shown to really do much damage. But when people start drinking alcohol every night, and here's the unfair part, it really is a sexist thing. It's gender specific. It's worse for women to drink every night than it is for men. It increases their risk of breast cancer pretty dramatically. But when it comes to ADD, all you got to do is think with me. Alcohol drops your frontal lobes. If you have ADD, you already have low frontal lobe function. It is not going to help you make better decisions. Now, if you have a little bit of wine, and when I say a little bit, we usually say 1 to 2 glasses a week. If you end up with 3 a week, not the end of the world, but probably 2 glasses a week would be what we would recommend as max. If you start drinking every night, it is definitely going to, studies show that you have a smaller brain, but it also affects your ADD because you already have low frontal lobe function, and now you're going to affect that more.
Okay. Whoa. All right. Well, this is really inspirational. Can you tell folks again how to find out information from you? Everyone, Tana Amen's presentation will be on the Attitude Magazine website, attitudemag.com/webinar, but really urge you to go to her website, tanaamen.com, for much more information, especially about healing ADHD with diet. Any last bits of advice, Tana, to the folks?
What I usually leave people with is I really do want you to think of yourself like a warrior. It's a paradigm shift. This isn't hard. When you have done the hardest things you've ever done in your life, how did you approach it? This is not hard. But if you think of this as the same thing and you are a warrior about it, and this is about the health of your children, your family, because what you're doing, this does not just affect you. This affects generations to come. The decisions you make today, the influence you have, and the legacy you leave. And that's really how I want people to think of it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Great inspirational advice. And thanks, everyone, for taking part today. Bye-bye.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.
Whether you're looking to build a website for your business, your hobby, your podcast, or just for fun, Pair Networks is your go-to web hosting partner. Not only do we have the lowest domain price in the industry, starting at just $11, we've got hundreds of stunning website templates to help you stand out from the crowd. You're not a techie? Not a problem. With our easy DIY site builders, you can launch your impressive website without any technical know-how. And when it comes to security and updates, don't worry, we've got you covered. Our 24/7 US-based customer support is the best in the industry. Check out Pair.com today to learn more. PAIR.com.